So on behalf of us both, of Yael and me, we would really, really like to welcome you, Anna. Apparently our destinies are to meet thus far too much in video, and we were all supposed to be in Japan right now at the biannual Docomomo conference. So we'll have to postpone that, I guess, to 2021, and hopefully we will meet then. Again, it's our honor. Anna has been president of Docomomo for a long time, and has always supported all our endeavors here in Israel, whether it's conferences and publications and all our activities. And I would like to take the chance to invite everyone, and of course our Israeli guests, to join us in the Docomomo activities planned for 2021. We're going to have a conference, and we're planning another publication and beginning we're beginning to work on an exhibition. And I'm holding here one of my all-time favorites, Tropical Architecture by Maxwell Fry and Jane Drew, and also the very recent Docomomo journal on the subject that Anna edited together with Pedro Guedes and Johannes Widodo. And it's a really amazing issue of the journal that deals with tropical architecture in the modern diaspora. It's a very timely subject, and I hope that here in Docomomo, Israel, we will continue also our work on Israeli architects that worked in the modern diaspora. And as Anna wrote in the introduction to her paper, this is really an amazing migration of modernism that was not just architectural, but also cultural and technological. And so I'm really happy, and again, congratulations on all our journals, but this one especially. So with these words, it's really good to see everyone, and you, Anna, especially. And thank you very much for coming here tonight.
So thank you so much, Inbal and Docomomo Israel, for this introduction as well. And I'm very grateful to the Liebling House, to Sharon. I would like also to refer Jeremy Hoffman, who was a little bit out of the Docomomo networking, but finally we had a very interesting meeting in Poland, and I would like to say hello to all friends, Yael, everybody, and tell you that it's really a great honor, proud to be in Tel Aviv, even if it's in a remote way. I prepare a very, very short introduction to Docomomo. I'm not sure if everybody is really familiar with our activities. So we are a group now, something like with 30 years old, very fresh, I would say, lots of women, as we can see here. We are let's say, spreading our influence and our networking in more than 70 countries. And now, as you know, the headquarters are in Lisbon, but there was a as well a diaspora from Delft to Paris to Barcelona and to Lisbon. As Sharon Inbal referred, I'm, let's say, taking a long mandate till 2010. I'm about to leave, I believe. We built during this time a great networking, since the Lisbon headquarters. You see here our partners a little bit everywhere in the world. And we hope to make a partnership with the Limbling House soon as well. And, you know, we have a very, very straight and clean statement that we transform in a way in 2014 in our Seoul conference, Seoul in Korea, in South Korea. We introduced the idea of the reuse, which we think it's very important. After 20 years of inventory, let's see how we could take this new decade a little bit more open in this concept of conservation and documentation. Next conference, let's hope the dates are fixed, 29, 31 August with some things in the beginning of September. Let's hope we can make it. Let's see. One of the important activities for us is always the workshop. We are working in a workshop in Japan as well. These are some images of the Lisbon workshop. It was really very important because now Lisbon municipality is transforming this great factory, and normally we cross let's say all the papers and conference with some guests to talk about important issues, and we publish normally book of proceedings. You know, this one is quite a great one. We call it a little bit the Bible, and we have other publications. I would like to take your attention for this first edition with China. It's the keynotes of the key papers in modern architecture, heritage conservation. It's an English-Chinese book, and of course we, with some kind of religious commitment, publish twice a year our Docomomo journal. Here you can see this modern Africa, this tropical architecture. It was published in 2013. And then we start sometimes a new type of journals, a kind of monograph on important modern architects. It was the case of Le Corbusier. Of course, the journal, they are not just on the architects' work, but mainly on how to deal with these buildings and these sites nowadays and in the future. So really the issues of restoration and so on. It was an incredible challenge to make this one on Louis Kahn. We work perfectly with the archives in Philadelphia, in the university. They were incredible, and it was really amazing to discover how Louis Kahn work is still in process today. Some glimpse on Asia, on the Sun architecture, on the East, and as you know, very recently, because we are always in the zeitgeist, always taking the wave, the first journal of 2020 was on, let's say, cure and care matters. So this was, of course, not expected. We were not waiting for COVID-19, but this is to say that we are always, you know, very, very sharp, and it was a very, very touching publication. We enjoy very, very much to approach these hospital, these healthy healing issues. And finally, as Inbal referred, this very, very recent this tropical architecture and the question of diaspora. And Israel is, of course, a cross place of this diaspora in the sense of course, receiving all the very modern architects, even women architects, as we know, but as well as collaborate with other countries, namely Angola in Africa, one of the countries that I'm going to talk, with your expertise in social housing and prefab construction, which is very, 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 very important. So let's make a kind of a symbolic homage to Tel Aviv and to an important architect, Genia Averbuch. I hope to pronounce correctly, but in fact it's amazing to see how a woman was able to make a plan. Of course, we know that nowadays it's very different, but to make a plan in the 30s for an important city that soon will be transformed in the capital. So we all know that women are normally not so active as architects. We prepare a virtual exhibition, which is a very important issue, and I hope that Israel can feed it more, because this is really, it's an iPhone application to show, let's say, normal people, now just experts on the issues of modern movement architecture. And so quickly, I'm going to move to the subject you proposed to me, which is something that I'm very proud to have conducted this research with a big team. We were something like 12 researchers from 2 different universities in Portugal, Minho and Lisbon. And in fact, we tried to make what was at the moment not really done yet, which is field work in the former Portuguese colonies. And of course, the question of colonies, it's a very hard and delicate question, not just in terms of politics, but as well as how can we connect, you know, with the others, because we are all part of this process of colonization and colonized. And modern movement architecture, as we know, it's a kind of colonization in a way, to show and to say that modern movement, it's the right way to be in a developed country. This is an incredible, huge philosophical question. I would like to ask your attention for a very recent book from a French anthropologue, Laurent Vidal, and it's in French, Les Hommes Lents, so the slow man. It's very, very interesting what he puts in a way to understand all this process of colonization. And of course, Portugal, this very, very little country in Europe, had connections, important ones, with Brazil and Africa. And it's very interesting to see how this network evolved from a country with, let's say, a dictatorship with a fascist note till 74, till our democratic revolution. And this is a terrible image, as you can see. This is the idea that Portugal, it's not a little country, this is the title, but a big country. And so the colonies were, you know, put it, saying that we were quite the size of Europe. And this is, let's say, the image of the 30s, you know, with all the fascist regimes and at the same time, the resistance coming from architects there was a poll, I would say a core of anti-fascist architects, and we start our investigation, our research, which we called exchanging world visions, because the idea was to understand how things turn, how this kind of diaspora took place. And so we start our research in the year of 42, which is the date of the exhibition in MoMA in New York of the Brazil Builds, and the catalog or the book was published the next year in 43. And this book from 43 was really very, very important. And it was very important because it introduced another way of looking to modern architecture and modernity, crossed with this climate, this tropical character and atmosphere and culture. So we may say that in Portugal, during the war and after the war in 45, things were in fact very, very different, and it was possible to embrace modern architecture without the censorship of the government. And 48, it's a very important date. In a way, it's the foundation of the State of Israel, but at the same time is the year of the apartheid and, paradoxically, of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So life is going like that. We try to make a kind of timeline. Of course, I have no time to go deep on this, but just to let you know that in 54, tropical architecture course was established at the Architectural Association, and that, for instance, in 59 took place the Inter-African Conference of Housing and Urban Development in Nairobi, with Portuguese architects taking part of this conference. And the year of 960, we call it the year of Africa. In fact, 17 African colonies got the independence. So 17 new countries in Africa. And the United Nations General Assembly declared the rights and independence of all colonial territories, including Portugal. But of course, our dictator thought that it could remain with this thing. So this is to say that soon we will start with a terrible war in the colonies. Of course, a reflex of the Cold War, and it took 13 terrible years in terms of, let's say, humankind problems and difference. But at the same time, architecture developed, and we see, for instance, here, the workshop of Pancho Guedes in his office, and some publications. And it's very important to see, not, of course, Frey and Drew are very, very important, but it's very interesting to see that Kulturmann, who was a German art historian, for the first time went to Africa and trying to fix this idea of this Neues Bauen, which is not anymore the Neues Bauen of Berlin, Weimar Republic, but it's the Neues Bauen in Africa. And in this book, published in 63, he is really optimist. He really thinks that Africa will be released, will be free, and he appointed a focus on education And he really thought that it was all the networking of schools and knowledge that will transform Africa. And we know that there are several universities really very, very important. And we are going to see one in Portugal and in Angola. And as well, the OGI Design with Climate book published in the same years. And in 74, finally, Portugal got the great shift, the revolution, and we are seeing images from Angola and from Lisbon, and in 75, the independence of all the colonies, and we see here the flags of Angola and Mozambique. And this is the book we published with all this research on these exchanging world visions aim, and we call it very straight, Modern Architecture in Africa, Angola and Mozambique. Of course, we try to look at archives, and it was very interesting that we realized that during our research, for instance, the archives of Maputo, of the public works, the first time I went there, they say, this doesn't matter, these are colonial issues, these are colonial documents, we don't care about this. And in 3 years, the thing changed, and it was really important for Mozambique to look at the archives. So this is really one of the points of the delicate matter of heritage, as let's say, we cannot speak about heritage and architectural heritage without this kind of feeling of being part of something. And this is very difficult to deal in this colonial process, of course. In Angola, we work in Luanda, Benguela, Lubita, and Huambo. It was impossible to go much further. We redraw cities, we redraw buildings, the case study. This is a view of Luanda in the 60s, and a view of Luanda some years ago. And now this photo is impossible because now all this bay is full of new buildings. In Mozambique, it was in a way more generous, and we were able to make a visit more spread in the fantastic territory of Mozambique and to redraw the cities. This is actual Maputo, former Lourenço Marques. And we try to find some kind of lines, some lines to go deep, and one was this idea of transfers and circulation in what of African art means. And it's really amazing to realize that there was in fact something crossing very straight between architecture and, let's say, painting, sculpture, and so on. Of course, we look attentively in Bal here, tropical architecture from 56, and then as well the 64 tropical architecture in dry and humid zones. All this stuff very important, and we start to look at a very interesting line, which is in fact the knowledge equipments and the schools. And there was a huge production of schools in Mozambique, and the research, and it was very, very, we were very happy because in fact there was a thesis from Zara Ferreira a master thesis just on this matter of the schools of Mozambique, and it was possible to study deeply all the, these climate design methods, with all of the system of the permanent ventilation, the system to control the sun, and to use in a way all these devices as a formal stimulus for a kind of joyful architecture. And of course, we made a database, and we tried to study all the urban planning here, some of the researched historical ones. For instance, this is a very interesting neighborhood, Prenda, in Luanda. Nowadays, it's completely surrounded by slums. And Fernão Simões de Carvalho is a very important architect, because he was really an Angolan, born in Luanda. He worked with Le Corbusier, and it's amazing the work he did, in fact. For instance, this is pieces of his master plan for Luanda, and we elected, of course, I'm trying to speed to keep the time, and we decided as well to follow a second or a third line, which is housing. Oh, someone should mute the phone. Okay, thank you. Housing. Of course, here we are not in terms of social housing. This is middle class housing. But it's interesting to see how all these devices, with galleries, with what we call the combogos, all these grids coming mostly from Brazilian architecture, as well as this integration of the arts in the buildings. This is a very, very, very interesting complex. We are talking about a plot in Kliman, with an hotel, with a supermarket, with housing, and with another pole, an industrial one. This is the hotel, and it's very, very curious, because when they decided to make this hotel, as you can see, it has been very, very well maintained till now, which is a very interesting thing. The first president of Mozambique, Samora Machel, was a great friend of the owner of the hotel, and himself, he took care of this place as something important in the country, in Mozambique. And this is the aspect of the industry pole, which we can see it was, let's say, abandoned. But it's very, very curious, all these parabolic forms. And today I realize that I received an email from 2 Italian researchers who are working on Luigi Nervi work in Africa, and it is amazing what he is. I think we are now, taking, emerging all these things in Africa, and in fact is amazing. And this perhaps has a lot to do with Nervi, and perhaps as well with the book of Udo Kulterman. So you can see this is the industry center, and the Mensa, the social place with restaurants and so on, in the middle of the houses of the workers and the engineers and so on. Religious architecture, of course, Christian, was important with these importations, a kind of diaspora as well from Mexico, from Candela, Brazil once again. And let's say another very, very, very special line of research are these open air cinemas, mainly in Angola. And it's amazing the quantity and the quality of these collective spaces, and most of them are very well restored. This is the case of the Splanada Atlântico in Luanda, but there's lots of, for instance, here in the middle, we are seeing Miramar. Miramar seems, it's the meaning of looking to the sea. So it's a fantastic place. You see in the top of Luanda, over the bay, and so it was the fantastic place to go to see cinema or just stay there to be in a fantastic place. So this is really a very peculiar and special typology from Angola, these open air cinemas. Some of them today are used for other things, and this is an example with a photo from one of the researchers, Ana Magalhães, and this is the open cinema of Lubito. And as you can see, at the time when we made the research, it functioned as an open air school. So the boys and girls, they brought their little chair from home to have classes in this space. So this is really an incredible world. In Mozambique, as I told you, there was a strategy, a strategy policy for schools with, let's say, I would say a very generous and interesting architect leading this program during the colonial times, of course. And it's very interesting because for the first time, we are seeing a woman architect, Ruth, like in Israel, Ruth Botta. She's the author of a school in the 70s. This is really very, very interesting. And you can see some of these cases. I will go very quickly, and perhaps the highlight of this typology made by the great architects of Mozambique, João Tinoco and José Forjás. José Forjás stayed in Mozambique after the revolution and made a huge and very, very important work there till now. And we are expecting a great exhibition in the Polimo, in the Polytechnic of Milano, that was expected to be done in March, but because of COVID was delayed as other things. So redraw was a very important key in our work, you know, because we realized that to take the next step, which is the one of the restoration or the reuse, it's really important to have all these drawings. And for instance, this case of the Beira railway station, it's nowadays one of the keeping it modern cases of the Getty Institute that you know. And it's very interesting, this railway station, to enlighten this question of heritage has a value of belonging, of the feeling that a community belongs to something together, that shared together. And so you see the new coin of metrical from Mozambique used the symbol of the station in the front. And the last step of our work was a workshop in the Eduardo Mondlane School, and it was in fact amazing to work in the university with the young students in the case studies we went deep. So now I ask Sharon. I still have 2 points I would like to show you, connected with 2 very special architects, but I don't know if we have time. I will take, I think, 10 minutes maximum.
I think, Anna, we should continue. It's so interesting.
Okay, so I will make it quickly in order to see if we can discuss a little bit.
Thank you.
Because it's very interesting to try to, you know, to approach and to, let's say, try to synthesize this diaspora of ideas, of cultures, of techniques, of ways of living. And of course, Le Corbusier was a kind of a very charismatic symbol for Portuguese architects. And I believe he went through the door of Brazil because he was a star in Brazil. And in fact, it was very important in Angola. But we are going to see that in Mozambique, it's quite different. And it's very curious to realize how these connections and these, let's say, changing of ideas, it's really very, very, very complex. So just to present you a kind of a Corbusian follower, Vasco Vieira da Costa, he felt as an Angolan. He stayed there after the revolution. He didn't come back or leave the country. He made his thesis on, as you can see in this image, very, very following all the housing unites, the, how do you say, Cité Radieuse, all these systems. He built one of the most important buildings in Luanda, the market, the Kinashish market. And it's so symbolic that it was destroyed 10 years ago. You can see here the implosion of this market because Luanda is, you know, being transformed with all the money of the petrol and all these things. And so the center is transforming completely in a kind of Dubai or Arab Emirates, all these ideas of, you know, glass curtain towers, which is perhaps not the most adequate to this climate. And so it's so interesting to realize how these guys were able to, with passive systems, to find ways to solve these continuous ventilation and try to avoid all the mechanical systems to, let's say, try to make the spaces comfortable in contemporary terms. So this is really one of the leitmotifs for this modern tropical architecture we may say. This is one of the social housing production. It's really amazing, this case he made. This is our redraw and the models we did with the students. And in fact, Vasco da Costa is one of the great architects, I would say, of the 20th century. He has been studied in a PhD by Margarida Quintin. If you wish, I can put her thesis in the Liebling House connection, because she made an incredible work on Vasco Vieira da Costa, and namely on this university, which is the Veterinary Academic Hospital. It was, we think, supposed to be the biggest veterinary high university in Africa. It is situated in Wambo. It's the name, or the new name of New Lisbon, Nova Lisboa, which is what was the colonial name for the city. And this place is a high plan with a very, very good climate for all agriculture and all veterinary issues. And it's very interesting to see how Vasco da Costa connects with New Brutalism ideas, or even with the béton brut from Le Corbusier and all these matters. For instance, the well-tempered environment of Rainer Banham, and all these things are, of course, very, very connected. And here we see pages of the Kulturman book exactly on knowledge, environment, buildings. And this brutal, you can imagine this place for buffaloes and big cows and all this stuff of incredible big African animals. And to finish, let's go to the Indico, to the other side, to next to India, to Mozambique, and to realize how was different the approach of the most impressive architect of Mozambique, which was Pancho Guedes. And Pancho studied in Witwatersrand University in South Africa, and he, in fact, was very, very connected with all the poetry and the creativity, the artistic creativity of architecture. And that's why his lemma, we may say, was fantasy must be brought back into architecture. And we're going to see Pancho here with his great friend Malangatana. Malangatana was, his work was to catch the little balls of golf, or to take care of little boys from the white families. So he had no profession. And Pancho realized that he had a kind of a creative genius, and made a deal with Malangatana and offered him his house to stay, to live, and allowed him to use the garage to paint. And Malangatana turns in a very, very important painter. So Malangatana was a painter. And of course, Pancho and Malangatana made this kind of exchange visions of their different worlds. And Pancho was so out, we may say, that he was part of Team 10. We can see him with the Allison, Smithson, Van Eyck, all this staff of people. And here, his great manifesto, I claim for architects the rights and liberties that painters and poets have held for so long. And so, in a way, he took part in this struggle against colonialism, Here the struggle continues, Pancho and all these process, of course, hard, with lot of problems, with terrible things, but at the same time, as he said, it was a world where anything seemed possible at the same time. And we are seeing here the things, the incredible things Pancho made here, the summer school in his office, here Pancho Guedes making himself the representative of a country called Mozambique. Of course, Mozambique didn't exist as a country, was a colony, but he represented Mozambique at the Biennale of São Paulo. It's crazy. And here is how he promote Malangatana to be a painter. And finally, we are going to see that it's going to be published in the Architectural Review and in the Architecture d'aujourd'hui. And himself, he's going to study the houses of the tribal creativity, artistic paintings from the group of Maponga. And he's going to publish his paper in Aujourd'hui, Art and Architecture in 62. And he take part in the first International Congress of African Culture in Salisbury, so in former Swazilandia, and he made acquaintance. He met Tristan Tzara, the Dadaist creator, and Tristan Tzara was, you know, amazed with Pancho and said, we have to come into this world to find the oldest and most archaic, oh my God, the most extraordinary things I've dreamed for 30 or 40 years and are now becoming reality in on the ground of Africa. Guedes believes that painting and sculpture are not only pleasure arts, but should be applied to homes, social life, spiritual life, the life of the imagination. He built extraordinary homes in Mozambique, an architecture of imagination, and I'm very happy to be here to see achievements that cannot be seen in the West appear in a new world in a state of fermentation. Sorry. So these are some of the works of, this is a bakery of Pancho. This is a garage. This is a housing building. So buildings should smile and speak. Of course, Pancho is a conference in itself. This is the Smiling Lion building. You see these graffitis, these paintings, of course, that he brought from Malangatana. So this is really these exchanging worlds taking place, these diasporas from art to architecture, from all these kind of incredible primitive expressions brought to architecture. And Pancho invented a kind of family of animals. So it's the lion, and here is Prometheus. All buildings have a name. And here this kindergarten is much something connected with what Louis Kahn was doing and trying to do at the same time. So it's fascinating to understand how these worlds connect and how architecture is a reflect and an action and a proposition of a world and perhaps of a new world. And I will stop now with this idea of design with climate and culture crossing all these things. Thank you for your attention.
Anna, thank you for this wonderful lecture and so many amazing images. It really makes everybody, I guess, want to go to Africa now. But I would want to start with one question, and then I will ask a few more questions by the audience. So in Israel, we refer to brutalism as a sort of the style of the welfare state. No, you mentioned it as well. 1948, the establishment of the state was kind of the birth of this late modernism in Israel. And still, a lot of people that use these buildings don't always really like them, unfortunately. So our task is, in a way, to make people appreciate, if not love, but at least appreciate these buildings. But here, in the case of Africa, or Angola and Mozambique that you mentioned, it was even, I think it's even harder, I guess, because it's sort of a colonialism style that, you know, you mentioned it a little bit. And I want to ask you if the community likes these buildings. I'm sure you cannot say it for all the buildings in all the states of Africa, but I just want to ask if the community respects these buildings in Africa, or do you think that they feel that it's not their own heritage?
I think that if we are talking about architects, of course, they respect a lot, and they feel that it's their heritage. I mean, it's a Mozambique heritage. It's an Angolan heritage. Of course, it's a modern movement heritage. For instance, it was possible to create a Docomomo Angola, and it's very fun because it's quite a group of women. But in Mozambique, till now, it was not possible because at least the discussions I had with my friends, because in fact we are friends, was so hard and so sharp that in a way, I may say that there's mainly this idea that it is a this struggle. But I do believe that in the 21st century, things are changing. For instance, in Angola, the open air cinemas, as they are, you know, a very social it's a program to be together and to have fun. It's incredible to see how these cinemas, I would say the majority, so I would say it's a little bit ambiguous. And in my reflection, which is, you know, a long reflection at this time now, I really do think, and it's difficult for a Docomomo president or chair to say this, but in a way, modern movement architecture, it's a way of colonization everywhere. In Portugal, you know, in my little country, you know, a rural country, why do we want to be modern? We don't want to be modern. We want still to have, you know, our monkeys or our... So it's a very interesting question, you know, to put together the countries in development and developing and the slow ones and how to put it together. But finally, I think that all humankind wants to take the boat of development, perhaps with cautions. And so what we are living now with all these climate problems, you know, with these transformations in the world that we finally realize that we are putting the world in danger. There's a lot to think about, and perhaps modern movement discussions, because there was not just a line or a true or a black and a white thing. I would say that modernity and all the aliving process of making the modern architecture took, you know, I think much care of people. The story of the publication of the Athens chart, it's very clear of that. It was Le Corbusier who published it, because Louis Mumford said, oh no, please stop, don't publish this thing. And so I really do try to define modern movement architecture as the way that architects with all the other disciplines answered to contemporary struggles to make a better life for all. This is my, you know, my kind of optimistic things. Of course, if we go to colonial times, there are terrible things, and perhaps I will be without head, you know, cut it.
Okay, so we have a few questions. One from Joe de Lagado. I'm sorry if I'm not saying the name right. Do you think these are authentic examples of modernity flourishing in Mozambique, or are they European models adapted towards an African culture? Modernization or Westernization? So I think you referred to it a little bit, but...
Yes. I think that mainly in Mozambique, there was a Westernization because of apartheid. And there was great connections, you know, with the English part and the Boers. So apartheid was a reality in Mozambique. And in Mozambique, for instance, the fantastic Pancho smiling, lying building, in the top, the last floor, was the place for the maids' sleep. So this is colonial. This is not modernization. But if we go to Angola, it's very, very different. And I may say that, for instance, since the end of the war, since 1945, it was possible black and whites or natives and Westerns to be in the same cinema. And this was a great step at the point. So now to try to answer to this very impossible question, I would say that this modernization first step was, of course, a Westernization, you know, and it was done in the city of the whites. This is another point, which is the planning. And this is another terrible reality. So in a way, it was this idea to make this modernization in a different place. But what I try to explain, mainly with Pancho Guedes, is that he crossed cultures in a way. Not just making a building as it was done in Frankfurt or in Houston, you know, it was completely different to do it in Kaliman or in Pemba, I think so. Perhaps not very clear because...
No, I think it's a wonderful answer. Actually, there are some more questions here, but I would like to actually, if I may, ask Tzvi Efrat, who is researching Aria Sharon, one of our architects that has been building in Ife, to perhaps, I don't know, give us a statement about what you know, from Ife, in comparison of what we just see now, if it's one language, if we're talking about, you just mentioned, Anna, that it's sort of a, you know, a fusion of the wish to embed this modernism within the culture of the country. So I wonder if we can say that about Ife as well, if there is some similarities between the buildings there and in Mozambique. Tzvi, if you can answer that.
Thank you, Sharon, for giving me the opportunity. And hello, Anna. Hi.
Hello.
Yes, certainly there are many similarities. First of all, more or less the same time frame, and it's same kind of, kind of colonial attitude, and it's the same sensibility and kind of amazing architecture that we more or less lost. Great attention, great care to climate and to culture. In this regard, of course, this is really something that is worthy of returning to, revisiting, studying, redrawing, preserving, and so on. Of course, it's a great quality. And in itself, if we talk about architecture per se, it's a wonderful, it's a wonderful outcome of the international style. Just a few remarks, Anna. First of all, I'm not sure you keep using the term diaspora, the diaspora of modernism, which is a beautiful term, but I'm not sure if it works, and I'm not sure if it's not kind of a sort of whitewashing, greenwashing the colonial aspect of it. So I think that diaspora has a different meaning, and it has to do with some kind of a local culture that disperses. So I'm not sure that this term works for me. I would challenge this term, but also I really like your statement, especially as the head of Docomomo, of modern architecture as a sort of meta-colonial style, which I totally agree in, and this is exactly the way that I tend to write about modern architecture migrating to Africa. I'm a bit concerned about this very meeting, about the fact that we are all white here, and I know people presenting the African perspective. And the question is, you know, of course, first of all, how many native, how many local architects were taking part in this modernist project in Angola and Mozambique? And this is one question, and from what I can understand, very, very few, if any. So when was the first school of architecture established in Mozambique and Angola? When was the Architectural Association established? It's probably around 1960 or in the 60s somewhere, but I'm not sure. And of course, what is the aftermath of the colonial modernist heritage in Mozambique and Angola? Is there any attempt to reclaim modernism as an architecture of decolonization, of independence, as the case is, for example, in Nigeria in some places? Or is it, again, as Sharon asked, just part of the colonial past, and we can now destroy it and build, contemporary Dubai buildings? So I don't know if it's a question, it's just a long comment for you.
Oh, it's a long, and I enjoy very much your comment as you start with these kinds of climate and culture, which is really interesting. All of these, let's say, devices they create. But I think it depends a lot. That's why I show you the coin, the metical, with the example of the railway station. This is very symbolic. This railway station doesn't work much nowadays because the Beira port was transferred to another place, to Nampula. So this train is not important. But for the people of Beira, it's so important, this symbol, that it was one of the symbols of the coin of the new country, Mozambique. I think, in a way, this is the proof that some of these buildings are really recognized as proper heritage. Now, concerning the architects, of course, there was not natives architects, because there was no schools in Angola or Mozambique. They had to study in metropolis. But Fernão Simões de Carvalho, the one we saw in Luanda, with the director plan, with the neighborhood unit and so on, he was born in Luanda, in Angola, in fact. And nowadays, I would say the Association of Architects, they really care about, or I would say the majority, they care about this heritage, because which is happening is the construction of all these, very glass curtain towers. It's the new colonization, in a way. And perhaps this new colonization, it's not so much connected with the place and the culture. Of course, it's a symbol of finally we are free and we are rich. And we are the ones who have the power. And in a way, this is a show off of this, we may understand. But perhaps let's be optimistic and think that we can have these towers made with an architecture, perhaps, or a concept more connected with the climate and with the resources, finally. I think so.
Thank you, Anna. Unfortunately, the time has run so fast, and we're already past our time. I would like to actually give some minutes for a closing remark by Jeremy Hoffman, that has written a book about brutalism, and is also the head of our research department. So please, Jeremy, we will close with you.
Just a minute.
Yes,
we must collaborate on this unbeloved brutalism.
We should.
Let's say it together.
Yes, I think Zvi also, he's doing a very beautiful project with his students, and I think to connect you two would be very interesting. And Jeremy, would you please say a few words, because I think you are the one to close this conversation on conservation of brutalism. Anna, from my side, it was amazing. I really loved your presentation and all the images. So thank you very much. Jeremy, please.
Yeah, hi, Anna. Hearing you for me is always the feeling like going back to the concert of your favorite rock star. So you think you know all the songs by heart, but you always learn amazing things. And I think you showed us here today really new aspects about Africa, which I really, really didn't know. And I think one of the points is this Brazilian influence that is so strong here in Israel, and the adaptation to climate. I think it's amazing. Just let me remind you, we spent some time together also in Belo Horizonte and in Brasilia. And this influence that goes around the world I think is a point showing that this modernism doesn't come only from Europe, but it travels around the world, and this influence is I think is impressive. Just to mention some points, the first is the question of the phenomena of massive urban extension. We didn't speak a lot about the urban aspects of modernism, we tend to see buildings, but I think the biggest question, and if I may say, even problem that will become a huge problem the next generation in Africa is the biggest extension of cities, and what are the urban infrastructures of cities and what they will become. So I just leave it as an open remark and question. And of course, the question of state of conservation of these infrastructures. We didn't speak about it. Are there any tools? Is there enough research? What is the state of research and knowledge of these structures? Because sometimes when you see the images, you see like these huge spaces, and the scale for us, especially as Israelis, and I suppose for Portuguese, is almost impossible to understand the scale of these areas. I would like to mention, if I may, one initiative, and I think if it could be a kind of closing remark, a new international initiative on modernism of Africa, which is, I think is the first time we'll talk about it here in Israel. It's called the MOHOA, the Modernism Heritage of Africa. Is an international project for research and creating of local hubs on research on modernism of Africa. It's a collaboration between UNESCO and Docomomo and ICOMOS and IUCN and ICROM and Cape Town University and UCL University and African World Heritage Fund. And I think it's a new beginning.
And Bezalel Academy.
And Bezalel Academy, and Zvi Efrat, of course, is participating.
Mike Turner.
And Mike Turner managing this project. And the reason I feel it's important is I will give just one number, one figure, and I'll talk about World Heritage sites just as an example. The quantity of sites nominated in Italy and France together are bigger than the whole continent of Africa, just to show the amount of influence of European narratives regarding or comparing to Africa. And of course, the second thing to mention is the nomination of Asmara in Eritrea as a city, as a modern city, 2 years ago, which is a huge celebration of starting to regard modernism of Africa as a part of our international legacy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Very much.
That was very important. I would like to invite everybody for next week's lecture. Again, Monday at 8. This time, Amir Peleg is with us. He is talking about the next layer of the city. So we're talking about building additions in Tel Aviv, a research done by the Conservation Department of the Municipality of Tel Aviv, Jaffa, about the second layer of the city. So we've been doing conservation for a while. Now it's time to reflect, see back what we've done. And this is a very thorough investigation of what it means to do building additions in Tel Aviv. And there's a lot to learn from it. So everybody who's dealing with conservation in any way should come to the next lecture we have on Monday about building additions. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating. And Anna, many, many thanks for your time and effort. And we really hope to see you here in Israel and do lots of cooperations together.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very good to see all friends. Very, very, and in fact, this I would like to mention this modern movement, MOMOHA. So modern movement in Africa, let's hope could be an important networking. And I hope we can do something together, because normally these, you know, the layers of Africa, you have the Portuguese speaking, the English speaking, the Dutch speaking, and the Portuguese normally are out. It's a kind of a destiny. So let's hope that we can put all together and make the link with Brazil. So bye-bye, L'chaim.
L'chaim.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.